All right, what's going on, Giants fans? You've heard the news. I'm shocked. I don't know if everyone else was shocked, but I am shocked by this news. I was pretty convinced that Joe Judge would at least make it through the GM interview process, but the Giants have fired Joe Judge after two seasons, 10-23. Giants are now looking for their fifth head coach in 8 seasons, and at the end of the day, Joe Judge didn't do enough. This was the right decision by the New York Giants and John Mara, and we're going to go through why it's the right decision. I'm going to go talking about the cons of Joe Judge, but we're going to talk about the pros too, because I do think the pros outweigh the cons for Joe Judge. But at the end of the day, he deserved to be fired, and the main reason why is because tying a hot seat head coach to a brand new GM was never going to work. It was never a plan of success. Now I'm frustrated at John Mara for not having this plan ready after 33 games of evidence, or 32. Not having a plan ready before kickoff against Washington where Jake Fromm was starting. This decision should have been made. Nothing from that game should have swayed you one way or the other. But good credit to John Mara for getting this done before the GM process started, because it would have been an issue in the GM process having Joe Judge still here. Even if you're telling those GMs that they get to make the decision, having Joe Judge still in the building would have hurt the GM process. Maybe you still get the right guy, but it would have hurt the process. And you know, there was an idea out there. Well, you let the next GM decide. That's something that sounds good, but just doesn't work. A new GM wouldn't hire Joe Judge if he was a free agent. You know, if Joe Judge just got fired by the Jets and had the same exact, copy and paste, he wouldn't have been interviewed by the new GM. And when I think of wanting my GM to decide, it's letting him decide on his own guy. And you can tell a GM candidate he has the decision all he wants. But having him there, knowing that John Mara likes him enough to not fire him the day after the season, would have put pressure on those guys to keep Joe Judge. And you say, well, then they shouldn't take the job. Well, guys want to upgrade. They want to get better in these jobs. They believe in themselves. They can fix things. And I don't think the GMs would have hated Joe Judge, by the way, either. I think they all want their own guy, but I don't think they would have hated Joe Judge either. So having that Joe Judge cloud over the GM process would have hurt the Giants' GM candidacy. Again, a hot seat's just not going to work. Like this roster, what was going to happen next year to keep Joe Judge? You win 7 games. That wouldn't have fulfilled the anger of Giants fans. There would have been progress, but it wouldn't have fulfilled it, even if it looked good. And here's the biggest thing, more so than just the season next year, or like, oh well, you give him 1 year, and if it doesn't work, fire him. This offseason is really important. You got 2 first-round picks. You've got 5 day 1 and day 2 picks. GMs and coaches work collaborative in this process, and that's part of what I liked about Judge. But Judge on the hot seat would have not been Judge year 1, going into his first season, and year 2 after being praised and feeling very safe, because Joe Judge did feel very safe going into this season. Joe Judge wanted to move on from guys that needed to be moved on, like Saquon, because that would have hurt the short-term success. If they got a really nice trade down package, you got the same one that you got last year from the Bears. I don't know if Joe Judge is on board with that, because that means he's losing out on, like we did this past year, Rashawn Slater or a Micah Parsons type player, where like this year, did it not suck kind of seeing Rashawn Slater and Micah Parsons do well and thinking those guys could be on the Giants? Yeah, but I still believe in the trade down. I think it was a very smart move. Obviously, you got to get the picks right, but that's what being an NFL GM is about, is getting the picks right. So I just don't think it would have worked. And I do think Joe Judge got screwed by this franchise, but he didn't do enough to earn a 3rd year. And again, especially with the GM. If this was Vic Fangio, then I think that Vic Fangio earned the right to come back, even though the Broncos fired him. His defense was balling, and then his offense was mediocre, with mediocre at best quarterback play and mostly bad quarterback play over his term. Judge didn't do that. He got 10 total wins. The first year was good. The good things we said about Joe Judge after year 1 are all true, but he just wasn't able to do enough in year 2 after a spending spree. And let's just talk about Joe Judge as a head coach. The 4th down stuff, that type of stuff, he was very stubborn in that. And that stuff gives you an edge, especially when you're not the Rams. Like Sean McVay's very conservative on 4th down. But guess what? The Rams scored a ton of points, so they can afford to be conservative on those stuff and not take those chances. Where like a team like the Chargers, like maybe they should be a little more conservative on that. That QB sneak stuff in the last game of the season, and I said that the last game of the season shouldn't have made an impact on what Joe Judge, the decision on Joe Judge, but that did bother me very much. Like there was no single game decision that bothered me more than that last game, because that was essentially quitting on your team, telling him I don't believe in you, even though he shouldn't have believed in that offense. But you got 3rd and 9 with 4 yards. You couldn't hand the ball off to Saquon Barkley. Like, you have that little faith that you're afraid you're going to get a 4-yard loss. So that's the type of stuff that bothers me about Joe Judge. And the fact that he didn't really bring anything to the table on game day for the most part because he wasn't a play caller. And that works great when everything's working great. But when it's not, it's like, okay, well, what do you bring to the table, from kickoff till the final whistle, to the kneel down at the end? Now, he did get screwed over, and this was the biggest way the Giants screwed him over. They forced Jason Garrett on him. That's been reported by people. I've been told that. They forced Jason Garrett on him. Not only 1 year, but 2 years in a row. Joe Judge wanted to fire Jason Garrett going into this year. And then they finally let him fire him this season. They finally let him fire him, which, I agree 100% with that firing. I do it 10 times out of 10. But it's not a good situation to be firing a coach over halfway through the season and coming off of a Monday night on a short week. And then on the second play with the new OC, Freddie Kitchens, Daniel Jones hurts his neck. Plays the rest of the game, but you get essentially one game with a hurt Daniel Jones. Now, I don't think Freddie Kitchens was the answer too, but I don't think Freddie Kitchens would have been hired if he was given the option to go out and get an offensive coordinator. He liked guys like Brian Daboll. Tried to get him both years, but obviously the Bills are going to block that, and I don't think Daboll would have came over the second year, even though he would have in Judge's rookie season. The defense, the other side of it, though, is that when Jason Garrett did leave, Mike Glennon had career worse. And I get there's personnel stuff, but you had to be more inoperable than what we saw even with those backup QBs, including Jake Fromm. You can't be that bad. That does speak on Joe Judge. But at the same time, you couldn't do what John Mara did to Joe Judge with Jason Garrett to the new GM with Joe Judge. You just can't force it on the new GM. So the pros. I love Patrick Graham. I really do. And those guys are tight-knit. Dave Gettleman didn't go to the Senior Bowl this last year. Jason Garrett didn't go down to the Senior Bowl this last year. Joe Judge and Patrick Graham did. Those guys are tight-knit. And Patrick Graham is a very smart coach. I know the defense didn't play to the standards that we wanted this year, but he's a very smart coach who adapts and changes and gets ahead of the times. This year's defense was very different than last year's. Now you say, well, bend don't break. No, it was very different the way they used safeties, the way they played the run game. And Joe Judge bought Dave Gettleman a 4th year. If Pat Shurmur's our head coach in 2020, Dave Gettleman is so he saved Dave. I guess that could be a con, is that he gave Dave Gettleman a 4th year. But he did come into and to shake up this organization. Scouts that have been here for a long time were fired when Joe Judge came into the building. First ripped off in 2020 and this past year. The 2020 draft process. Did we not love that process of that draft? I love that draft looking back. You got Thomas, McKinney. Those are essentially the best 2 picks in Dave Gettleman's career. And then taking a guy like Shane Lemieux, that's a good 5th round pick. You get Tay Crowder, Darnay Holmes in the 4th round. Who'd they get in the 3rd round? Parrott, that's a bad one. And then you had 10 picks. You get a core special teamer like Cam Brown. Love that draft. And then the 2021 draft, Dave Gettleman has never traded back in his career, and he traded down twice. And I believe that was a Joe Judge move. You guys remember on day 2 when they did the trade down for the for the 2nd round pick and got Aziz? Remember Dave Gettleman shaking his head? You remember that? That was a lot of process stuff. Wow, should have had that on silent. Sorry, what was I saying? That's a lot of process stuff that Joe Judge brought to the New York Giants. And again, dealing with not only Dave Gettleman, who we spent 20 minutes on the pod yesterday ripping, who deserved to be fired for a lot longer before Monday. We're dealing with John Mara and the Chris Mara and the Tim O'Donnell. It's a losing battle with this Giants organization. I hope they're making some changes. I hope this new GM and head coach come in and make some real changes. I think he's a smart young guy who still has some things to figure out in this league. But I think our opinion on Joe Judge is a lot different if he got his own offensive coordinator. I love the way he handled Mark Colombo deserved to be fired. And Joe Judge, I give him credit for the Andrew Thomas midseason transformation in his rookie season. I'm an idiot. I'm a football guy. Midseason transformation. Because what happened after that Eagles game where Andrew Thomas got killed in that game, worst game of his rookie season, it seemed like he was getting worse. Mark Colombo had him doing all these things with his hands, double shooting, trying to debate guys. Joe Judge, after the tutelage of Googe, who they brought in, said, put his right foot and let it lag a little bit. Tell him to trust his athleticism against these NFL speed rushers. And all of a sudden, Andrew Thomas started getting better every single week. And then, Joe Judge tried to bring Googe in to help, and then Colombo lost his mind, and then Joe Judge fired him. He does handle players very well in front of the camera and behind the scenes. Now, I know some players have kind of lost faith in the system, and I don't blame them because they've been pretty damn bad. But it's like a human relations, like he did a good job of that stuff, and that's what always bothered me about like the people getting mad at him for laps and stuff. Like those players like him. There was a reason we all like this guy coming into this season. So I do think just Joe Judge evaluating him as a head coach, there's more pros than cons. But the pros weren't enough to give him another shot with this new GM. They just weren't enough. Don't make the same mistakes, John Mayer. I've given John Mayer a lot of crap, but I give him credit for doing this and doing this now. Not going through the GM process and then doing it. Doing this now before the GM process starts, because it was never going to work. It was never going to be a good marriage with Joe Judge and the new GM, unless they had one of those crazy turnarounds in year one. So we'll have a podcast out in the morning, but I wanted to get this quick hitter video out there. Appreciate you guys. I know people are like, you defend Joe Judge, he's the dumbest person in the world. I feel like when we look back, we'll say, maybe our feelings and emotion weren't as harsh. But this was the right decision by John Mayer and the Giants. So we look for our 5th head coach in the last 8 seasons. Like, subscribe. Let's go Big Blue.